Hello everyone, this is Direwolf20 and welcome to part 2 of my RFTools Control Mod Spotlight. Today we're going to look at some of the more complex features that RFTools Control has to offer. Now, I don't want you guys to be intimidated. Just because it's more complex doesn't mean you're going to have trouble understanding it. It's not that bad. The other thing that I want to make sure you've done is reviewed part 1 of the Mod Spotlight, because part 2 relies on a lot of knowledge that I transferred to you guys in that one. So make sure you understand what's going on here. Make sure that you've followed along with part 1 and you have a pretty good grasp of how those things work before we jump into part 2. Cool. So let's get started taking a look at some of the other blocks that are available in RFTools Control and some of the other opcodes that'll be useful for you. One of the first things I want to describe to you guys today is the node. The node is like an extension of your existing processor, and it can be interacted with in the world to interact with other stuff in the world so that the processor can do things remotely. So the processor needs power, so that's one side of the block. Sometimes you want it to receive redstone, that's another side. That leaves only 4 other sides to interact with things in the world. You might need to extend that, and for that we've got the node. The nodes are accessed by giving them a channel, in other words, set the name of the network channel to connect to. We'll call this dir. And then the node we can call 1. Cool? So channel dir, node 1. Pretty easy. We head over to our processor, and if we type help here, we'll remember that there's a bunch of commands. One of those is net setup. Cool. It's telling me there's no network card in there. So in order for this to work, we're going to have to install a network card. Okay? Not too hard to get. You can also get an advanced network card. Okay? This one basically gives you more range. The basic network card, 17 by 17 by 17. Advanced is 33 by 33 by 33. The advanced also allows one processor to talk to another processor anywhere in the world. Sweet. So because we're talking to nodes and it's pretty close by, we'll go with the basic network card. So let's pop this in here and try that net setup again. Missing channel name. Set up a channel first. Oh, right. We should type net setup dir. Cool. It found one node on the dir channel. So because I created a channel named dir, it went and found all the nodes that are out there. Now, if I wanted to, I could have another node. And that node could be over here. And we'll name it the same channel name, dir, but node 2. Now when I run net setup dir, it's going to find 2 nodes. Cool. What are crafting stations? Stay tuned. So last episode, you may recall that I wrote a nifty little program that makes sure there's always 10 cobblestone in the chest to the right of the processor. If I remove some cobblestone, it puts some more back in there, and if I put too much in, it takes out the excess. And it'll always keep 10 cobblestone in there no matter what. Pretty cool. Let's go ahead and adjust this program to work with nodes. Maybe instead of working with the chest to the north side of the processor, I want to work with the chest to the right side of the node number 1. How do we do that? It's really pretty easy. First, we head over here and we start editing our program. So we basically have to change the inventory that we're interacting with anywhere that we cared about the north face of the processor. Okay, so one of the first things we counted the number of items in slot 0 on the north face of the processor, right? So in this case, instead of going with the north face of the processor, we're going to fill in a node name. Optional name of a node on the network. Well, I named that node number 1, didn't I? Yeah, cool. So we're going to go ahead and say node number 1, which doesn't have to be a number, by the way. There could be text there. It could be node like dir node 1 or something like that. I just made it 1 for simplicity's sake. Okay, so now we're looking at node 1, the inventory north of it. Pretty straightforward. Okay, setting the variable, didn't care about the inventory side. Testing the variables, none of this stuff mattered, right? But over here, we do care. This one's moving from the north to the up. So we want to say node 1. And this one's moving from the up to the north. So in this one, we want to say node 1. Cool. And that should be all she wrote. So go ahead and click save on your program. Transfer the program back into here. And what we should find is pretty quickly, we've got 10 cobble in this chest. Pull cobble out, more goes in. Put too much in, it pulls it out. So very simply, you can see that we've just changed this program to work with a node rather than the processor itself. This is great. We can use this to manipulate inventory across distances. So for example, maybe we wanted the chest that we pull from to be above node 2. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So let's get a bunch of cobblestone, throw it in there, and I'm going to change up the program again. So let's grab this guy, and we're going to say this is the north one, this is the up one. We're going to say node 2 for the up one, node 2 for the up one, and save it. Okay, Cool. We no longer need either of these chests. So let's go ahead and break them. Okay, 2 chests, totally gone. Now we let our program run. And we'll see that every time I pull items out of here, it's going to refill them. And it's refilling them from the cobblestone in this chest. 44 in the slot, remove 10. 10 more goes in, 34 in the slot. If I put too many in there, it's going to extract 42, and it's going to wind up putting the excess in this chest. So this would be a great way to set up some kind of automation system for smelting or processing of your ores, or pretty much anything you can think of. And remember, it doesn't have to be chests. For example, we could have a furnace there instead of a chest. And if we went over to our program, the only thing we have to change is to check the number of items. Remember when we said if you're working with a furnace, you should specify which side to access? So we'll access the top side. Cool. And we'll do the same for any of these. Access the top side, and then access the top side. Nice. Save the program. By the way, you'll get errors if you break the chest before you take the processing card out, like I did. Derp. But that's fine. Go ahead and place it in there, and all of a sudden, it's keeping 10 cobblestone in there. And every second, it's going to check how many cobblestone are in the furnace and put 10 more in, or put in however much to make it 10. So as soon as it finishes smelting, it should throw another one in there, and it's going to keep going until this stone is all gone, or at least filled up. So another thing I want to let you guys know about is that you can easily copy and paste the programs you've written. Hold down the Control key, and you'll get a bunch of commands that you can access. Control-click to add or remove selection, Control-double-click to deselect sequence, Control-A to select entire grid, Control-C to copy entire grid. This also copies it to your computer's clipboard, and if you want to go drop it into Pastebin, you can. And you can Pastebin it for your friends, which is awesome. What I'm going to do is get myself another programmer here, and Control-V to paste it into the programmer. Cool. That's awesome. Control-X, by the way, does a cut and paste, and Control-Z will undo the last paste operation. Pretty cool, right? So the biggest part of this is when you copy it to your clipboard, you can paste it into a text document or into Pastebin or somewhere else on your computer so that it doesn't live only in your Minecraft world. And then if you want to send the nifty program you wrote to some of your friends, totally doable. So remember I said a moment ago that if you have advanced network cards, you can send processes and information to other processors in the world. Well, that's what we're going to demonstrate right now. It's pretty cool, actually, and pretty easy to do. So first, you're going to want to get yourself one of these guys, the network identifier. This is going to let you tell the computer here, the processor, what other processor to send the message to. First, shift right click on the block that you want to send to. Okay, that's this one. It's linked to the processor in dimension 0 at those XYZ coordinates. Cool. The next thing you want to do is put it in an inventory slot. So let's go ahead and put it in this one. Cool. This is the inventory slot we're going to reference when we tell it which computer to send the message to. So far, so good. Next up, we're going to need a couple program cards. The first one is we're going to want to go ahead and we're going to clear these. We're going to go ahead and say that we want to send a message to the processor that's represented in this slot. Easy peasy. Let's do it. So we're going to do this on a redstone pulse. So whenever I click the redstone on the south side, okay, we're going to, let's get a string. So we're going to evaluate a string, and its value will be, hello, friend. And we're going to store that in a variable. And that variable will be variable 0. Okay, so when this program runs, it's going to create a string called hello friend, and it's going to store it in variable 0. And then what I want to do, and we're going to filter on communication here, we're going to send a message. Okay, the message name is pretty much the name of the message. So we'll just call this message name. Seems easy enough. The ID slot, internal processor slot with the identifier of which to send the message. Now here's a tricky thing that I want you to know. When we click on this, we can see slots 0, 1, 2. I'm going to have this program run in parallel with my moving items around program, so it's going to go in this slot. And notice that I clicked on this slot. You might have thought this slot would be number 4, but relative to the program, it's slot 0, 1, and 2. So like, let's do that, right? So now it's slot 0, 1, and 2 relative to the program. Neat. And the same for the memory down here. Memory slot 0 relative for that program. So even though Here it looks like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is 0, 1, 2 for this program. This is 0, 1, 2 for this program. So we're going to tell this guy that his slot where the network identifier is going to be in slot 0. Okay? And again, that's going to be right here. So let's put him in there. And he's ready to send the message, right? The next thing we want to say is, where is the variable? What variable are we sending to him? And that is going to be variable number 0. The same thing that was here. That's all there is to it. We'll name this send message. And we'll pop this guy into slot number 2. So he now has access to this variable, which he knows as variable 0. And he has access to these 3 slots, which he knows as slots 0, 1, and 2. Pretty cool. Now we need to get this program ready to accept a message. And that's really easy, right? So let's clear these out and put this guy in here. And we're going to say that this program is going to run whenever you receive a message. So that's the event that we're going to use. We can tell it what matching message name. We're going to call it message name. So when you receive a message whose name is message name, you're going to go ahead and run. And the single rule applies the same, right? Only run once for every time you get the message, and then when the program's done, you're allowed to run again. And what we're going to do is we're simply going to output to the console what the message is. And we'll use the last string function. That's it. So whenever you receive a message, write it to the console. Done. Okay? So pop this guy in here. Now when I press this button, we should see no errors. And this guy should be saying, hello, friend. Pretty cool, right? So if you get complex with your programs, right, and you want to have multiple programs that kick off functions on other ones, right? So maybe we could monitor these inventory slots, and over here, when we notice that we have a certain amount of stone, we could go ahead and wind up, kicking other stuff off. Totally doable. Another program could do certain things based on what this program is doing. So there's a lot of useful uses for this. Like an example might be you might send from this processor the number of items in the output slot of the furnace, and that number is then used by this program to extract that number of items and throw them in another chest somewhere else, right? So plenty of cool uses for that. So that pretty much covers the networking part of stuff. Like, frankly, it's pretty cool and very powerful. And once you understand how networking works, you should have no problem interacting with multiple inventories in remote locations. The next system that I want to describe to you is the crafting station, crafting card, and workbench. This allows you to teach your programs how to turn items A, B, and C into item Z. You can basically use any combination of items. It doesn't have to be vanilla crafting. It can be machine crafting, vanilla crafting, a combination thereof, really as much as you want. You can use it to craft items on demand, but you can also use it to manipulate items. Those of you who watch my Forgecraft series saw me build a whole complicated rune crafting system using the crafting setup with the processors. So let's talk about how they work. So first off, you're going to need to get yourself a crafting station. This gets placed in the world, and then you type net setup. We'll do dire again. This time it found 2 nodes and 1 crafting station. Cool. Told you I'd tell you about those guys. The next thing you're going to need is a workbench. The workbench is responsible for actually doing some of the crafting if you want it to, but it's also important to use if you want to have crafting cards and specify what ingredients belong to making what. So we'll start off simple, and then we'll go more complex, because that's usually what we do. So the crafting card is pretty easy. You can go ahead and use a regular 3x3 crafting recipe or more complex ones if you want. So for example, if we wanted to craft a furnace, it might look something like this. But not with 64 of each, 1 of each. And update, we'll go ahead and update the item output in the 3x3 slot grid to do that. If you wanted to, you could also look up furnace and shift click it in there. Sweet. This card now goes inside the workbench in one of the slots. Because the workbench is adjacent to the processor, and because the crafting station exists in the world, now the processor knows the recipe for a furnace is 8 cobblestone. So now let's do something with this thing. Let's go ahead and tell it to craft the furnace. So I'm going to say, when I get a redstone signal on the south side, let's filter on the category for crafting. There's a lot of crafting things I can do. The one I'm going to choose right now is Operation Get Ingredients. Okay, what this is going to do is it's going to try and get the ingredients from adjacent inventory or an adjacent networked inventory. So we're going to say the chest that's above the processor, and we're also going to look at the north side of the processor for the card inventory. That's what this is. Inventory adjacent to network block with crafting cards. That's this one, the north side. From there, we're going to go ahead and say, what item do we want to craft? In this case, we're just going to say furnace. We'll look at doing this dynamically in a little bit. And then we have to specify the slots to store this in. Now, this is a shaped recipe, so you need to give it enough slots for all the different shapes, and we'll see why in a second. So we're going to say from slots 0 to slot 8. Does that sound cool? And that's pretty much all we have to do. So first thing I'm going to want to do is take this thing and make sure that slots 0 through 8 are available to that program card. And then we're going to go hit save. And run the program. Boom. See how it pulled in the items in the exact shape it needs? Cool. It should also be noted that according to the crafting operation named get ingredients, that it will tell you the amount of failed items as an integer. So if you go ahead and configure that to write it out, or maybe use that elsewhere in your program, maybe you want to do an if this is greater than 0 kind of thing. See how there's only 6 in there? When I click the button, it's going to only grab some of them, and it's going to give you the number 2 there saying, hey, I'm missing 2 of the items that I need. So the next thing we're going to want to do is, after we get the ingredients that we need and place them in that pattern, we're going to want to go ahead and then push them into the inventory to the right to get it to craft. Seems pretty straightforward. So let's do it. All we need to do is find ourselves the opcode that will push multiple items. This one. Cool. So where are we going to push to? We're going to push to the north side, and you want to push into the top of the north side because when you push items into a crafter, it needs to go into the top. The first slot of the internal inventory will again be 0 through 8. Okay? And also important, when you push to the external slot, you want to tell it to push to external slot 0. That's the first slot it'll push to. So if we go ahead and save this program now, we will find that when we push the button, it's going to, and I'm going to put it in this slot, pull the items in, but then immediately push them over to here into the appropriate place. Let's see if that works. Nice. Cool. So now it's ready to make the furnace, right? Let's go ahead and take this one step further and actually get the furnace, okay? And for that, all we have to do is add one more line. And that's going to actually pull the contents out. So what we want to do, we want to do fetch items, okay? From the inventory on the north side, and we want to actually pull from the bottom, okay? Down is the way to pull out of these slots, okay? Slot in inventory, we can probably leave that blank for now. Item, we're going to leave that blank as well. Slot out, this is internal to the processor where it's going to land. So I'm going to tell that to sit in slot 0. Cool. Now we save the program and pop it in here into the second, and then we hit that button. Nice, the furnace landed in slot 0. So that's how we can get this thing auto-crafting items for us. Now we can take this one step further. Remember I placed down this crafting station. Even with this card in the processor, the crafting station doesn't do anything at the moment. However, there's an opcode that we can use, and it's going to be, instead of on the event redstone, we're going to say on event craft. It's actually, yeah, craft is what we want. And this is going to kick off an event that will allow us to craft something. Cool. So the item, the inventory with crafting cards, we have to tell it where the inventory with crafting cards is. That's on the north side. And then the simultaneous run item, we'll let that be true. Cool. And then that's going to go off across to here. Now there's a couple things we might want to change. For example, the item that's being crafted, instead of being this, if we go to the function tab, you'll see there's the current desired crafting result option. So what we're going to say is the item to craft is the desired crafting result. Cool, right? And then over here, everything looks good. We're pretty much ready to go. So if we were to hit save on this, we should be good to go. So let's see. If I pop this card in here, now over in my crafting station, we should see that there's a furnace option for us. So let's go ahead and try and craft it. If I left click to craft, it's going to sit there and say that it's waiting to craft a furnace. And it did in fact craft one. Neat. So now that we've updated our code to go ahead and craft a furnace, which we're going to cancel, we have to actually get the code to understand that the furnace was successfully crafted. So let's handle that next. So to do that, we just need operation mark craft OK. And optionally, you can tell the internal processor slot where that craft result is going to land. So I'm going to say slot 0. This is pretty cool because what it's going to do is it's going to automatically transfer the item in slot 0 back to the crafting station once that crafting is done. So let's go ahead and drop this card in here, and we're ready to request the crafting of a single furnace. Boom. It says OK, and we get the furnace over here. Awesome. So that's how you can build crafting codes. Now, there's a lot more you can do with this, obviously. This can be way more complex. Crafting furnaces is pretty simple, and most other mods have some kind of automated crafting mechanic that can handle it. However, let's say that you wanted to craft something way more complex with multiple steps. All of that could be handled through this, right? And you can have certain items from certain inventory slots be pushed to other machines, and there can be some workbench crafting and all that stuff. So this doesn't have to be relegated to simply one crafting step at a time, nor does it have to be relegated to just vanilla crafting recipes. You know, you can process things in some machines and then combine them all in the end to make your final result. You can do a lot with this system, and again, it's how, complex you want to make it, right? If you want to be able to make a really complex craft, totally doable. Again, for reference, check out my Forgecraft video where I did the rune crafting. That was a very complex crafting system that no other mod has been able to handle the complexity of, and it was made extremely simple because of the crafting system in RFTools control. Some of the other opcodes you might want to have is mark craft failure. So you can do one of those evaluation checks where you make sure you have all the ingredients you need, and if you don't have them, you can mark it failure. And then there's also get ingredients smart. What this will do is it'll kind of recursively go down the line. So maybe if you teach it how to make wood into wood planks, and then you teach it how to make a chest, you can do get ingredients smart. When you ask for a chest, if all you have is wood, it'll know that it can make its way towards getting a chest by turning wood into wood planks and then wood planks into a chest. So you're going to want to play with these on your own. If I went through every opcode in RFTools control, the spotlight would be 10 episodes long, so I'm not going to do that. What I recommend is you playing with some of these opcodes on your own. I'm giving you the basics to give you a foundation. It's on your plate to figure out, the rest of this. So another fancy thing that this mod supports is liquid control. So I've got a nifty program card here. We're going to name this sample liquid. And basically what it does right now is it just uses the eval examine liquid opcode, which just tells you what kind of liquid is in a slot. You can look at a nearby tank. So I'm looking at the tank that's above the thing, and we're going to access it on the north side. Then we're just going to output the type of liquid into the console. Should be pretty easy. And that runs on a redstone signal. So boom, water. Neat. Now, if you want to interact with liquids in any way, which we do, you want to make yourself a multi-tank. Pretty straightforward. What this thing allows you to do is you'll notice as soon as you place it in the top left, you'll get 4 extra slots. This thing has 4 internal tanks, which can all hold 10 buckets worth of liquid each. And they can all be different liquids, which is neat. So let's give it a shot. In here, there should be some kind of opcode for transferring liquids around. And there it is, fetch liquid, which will fetch a liquid from an external tank adjacent to the processor, or a connected node, and place the result in an internal tank, provided a multi-tank adjacent to the processor. So that's all there is to it. So after we write out what kind of thing it is, we'll say tank adjacent to the network block. Where do we want to pull from? We'll say the tank above us, pull from the north side. Seems pretty easy now. Amount of millibuckets to fetch, let's say 1,000 millibuckets, which is 1 bucket. Optionally, you can specify water by putting a liquid by putting a bucket in there, and then the internal processor for the fluid result, and we'll just say slot 0. Okay, so when we save this bad boy, every time we run the program, it should pull 1,000 millibuckets or 1 bucket's worth of water into the internal buffer. Missing internal fluid slot. Oh no, I probably have to assign them. There we go. Now we should be able to press the button. And ta-da! We've got water, 1,000 millibuckets worth. And we can see in here we've got 1,000 millibuckets of water. And we can see here that we lost 1,000 millibuckets of water. So pretty finessey way to make sure you pull exactly enough water. And you can do all the same stuff that we did before, right? So you could also use, for example, if we find it down here, a push liquid, which will push to an adjacent tank. Just like we did with fetch items and push items, and we set up that whole system last episode where we transferred items from one chest to another and kept it stocked and made sure you had the exact amount of liquid at all times. Totally doable here. In fact, this might be a really nice way to manage the lava in another mod made by McJady that has something to do with generators and keeping a certain amount of lava in a tank at all times. Just saying, that might be a useful thing to do. Speaking of that mod, there are hooks for it. So way at the bottom are some opcodes for other mod type stuff, and we can read information from Deep Resonance. So if you guys remember the Deep Resonance mod spotlight, Deep Resonance Liquid has different types of stats on them. So for example, we can drop this opcode in there and just say, hey, read the quality in the tank to up on the north side, let's say. Cool. So if we went and saved that, those of you looking for a nice way to automate deep resonance liquids, probably this is the route you want to take. So again, the nearby multi-tank just extends the water holding capacities of the processor, and now the processor can transfer liquids from one tank to another. Pretty cool. Other things you can do with this mod, we can do some manipulation or looking at RF energy. So, for example, if we wanted to go down here and find this guy, get RF in machine or get max RF in machine. These are a couple of the opcodes that can work with energy. So if we said the machine on the top, how much RF is in there, and let's say that we grabbed one of these creative capacitors. Should be pretty straightforward, right? So we'll save our program. Let's see how much RF is inside that creative capacitor, shall we? Cool, 2.5 million. Yeah, that jives. Awesome. So you can see, you can figure out how much is available in there, how much is max, and then you can do stuff to figure out with a little bit of math, what percentage it's at, use it to read values, turn on and off machines, that kind of stuff. All right, guys, I feel like this is a good point to wrap up the spotlight. I've showed you some intermediate level difficulty stuff, but it's really not that bad. The networking stuff is really cool, and it allows you to pretty much expand your footprint of what your processor can handle, and it definitely makes for some cool stuff. The crafting is also very powerful. If you have complex crafting sequences that are very complicated and hard to automate with other mods, definitely worth looking at. Obviously, crafting is not the focus of this mod, but it's definitely something that you can do with it, like all other things. And then we took a look at the liquid and energy handling type stuff that you can do. Now, there's a lot more that we haven't covered yet. There's some graphical stuff that you can do. You can draw some pretty cool graphics in World with it, and you can also like do a bunch of measurements on MBTs. There's loops. There's a few things we just haven't covered that are what I would call more complex. Handling of exceptions, that kind of stuff, right? So what I'm going to do is make a third episode for the more complex stuff. Oh, we also didn't talk about locks. We need to talk about those too. Locks are pretty interesting and useful. So pretty much everything I've shown you thus far, you can use to do a lot of good stuff. But if you really want to get complicated into some deep stuff, episode 3 is where it's going to be. And then there's a few other things I haven't showed you. I haven't showed you what these buttons do, right? Like what's exclusive mode mean and what do these overhead logs do. This button's pretty cool. I'm going to be honest with you. Briefly, I'll show you that by turning on the log, you can see what's going on there. And by turning on the DB, it's the same information that you would find if you typed list. Yes. So the same information that if you typed list, you would get above here. So there you go. You figured out what that does. Graphics we'll talk about next episode, and then off. So for now, Darryl20 signing off. Hope you enjoyed part 2 of the RFTools Control Mod Spotlight. Part 3, like I said, will be coming up soon. This will cover some more of the advanced stuff that's available in the mod to do. Like I said, it's a lot of fun, and it's a cool mod. So for now, take it easy.